Well, hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Veg Grower Podcast. My name's Richard and I want to encourage and inspire you to grow more of your own food in whatever space that you have available. And I do this by sharing exactly what I've been up to in my own allotment and my own garden. Now, coming up this week, we've got an update from the allotment in where straw bale garden has been started down on the allotment as well as at home. I've also visited Stephen's allotment, which is always nice to get out and about and see other people's allotments. And then, of course, we have an update from the kitchen garden back at home. Now, I'm starting off this week down on the allotment, and being the last week of April, it has started to really come to life. I mentioned last week that we're holding off from planting any plants outside at the moment because there is still just a slight risk of frost. But that doesn't mean that I can't sow any seeds in the ground. And this is something that I have done this week. Now, normally I don't really sow seeds in the ground. The only seeds I would sow in the ground would be some of our root crops, our onions, our carrots and things like that, things that really don't like being disturbed. And the main reason that I don't sow direct is because of the risk that the weeds will drown out any of our young plants. But what I've decided to do this week is actually sow seeds directly in the ground, mainly our runner beans and our French beans. So I've gone to these beds where runner beans and French beans are going to be. I've put up a frame for the beans to climb up as they grow. This is of course using my hazel sticks from previous years that I've cut down and kept to one side. I've just stuck those in the ground after giving them all a good weeding, and then I've placed a couple of runner bean or French bean seeds around each post in order to, well, hopefully the seeds will germinate and they will just start climbing up around each single hazel stick. And that is hopefully going to provide us with some good French beans and runner beans. Now, I have sown some of these back at home to be on the safe side. As I said, normally I don't direct sow. I much prefer to sow things where they are to grow. But this year, I just wanted to do something a bit different and try also to save some time. Now, with the beans now sowed, I gave it all a good watering, and I've then gone to the metal grow bed that I spoke of last week. Now, last week I was saying that it's going to cost a lot in compost to fill it up, and I contemplated straw bale gardening in this, which is an experiment we're doing back at home. I decided that I'm going to do straw bale gardening in this, so I went to our local supplier and I got a couple of straw bales that have gone into this. I've then obviously got to go through the whole conditioning phase over the next couple of weeks, and then eventually we will plant that up with some other plants, maybe tomatoes, cucumbers, etc, etc. I'm not quite sure just yet what is going in here, but we got a plan anyway. And my main reason for doing this is that I'm hoping that the straw bales are going to eventually rot down to compost. And because they're going to rot down in compost in this metal tray, that's going to save me a fortune in compost. At the same time, going to hold back any weeds as well. Now, because straw bales only cost me about £3.50 a bale, and I've used 2 in this metal tray, I think it's going to be a lot cheaper than buying bags of compost. Of course, we have to factor in things like urea as a fertiliser to break down these straw bales. But the general idea is that it will break down and it should be cheaper with our compost costs. Compost, of course, being one of the most expensive things that we have to pay out for. But I also brought a couple more bales, and I've used this around my potatoes. Now, I've noticed in this last week my potatoes have really started to grow. They've put on a really good amount of growth. So I've just taken some of these straw bales, I've broken down the straw and just put it all around the potatoes in order to mulch them and earth them up. I don't know how well this is going to work. I've tried growing potatoes in straw before, but that was completely in straw. There was no soil on the bottom, and now I'm hoping that we're just going to mulch all these up with straw and they're going to grow just as well. I'm also hoping it's going to reduce the amount of weeding that we have to do again. Mulching is such an important part of growing our own. And for me, one of the main reasons that I mulch, obviously reduce weeds, big thing, reduce the amount of watering because of this less loss of evaporation. But also, we're adding organic matter to the soil, and everything about gardening, the number one thing I think we have to think about is looking after the soil, improving the soil, because our plants grow best in good quality soil. So by mulching, and I was reminded of this last week when I went to see Adam Frost, the Gardener's World presenter, do a talk at a stately home. I was reminded just how important it is to mulch in order to look after our soil, in order to improve our soil. So overall, as I said last week, we've really kept on top of the allotment. It's looking pretty damn good, I have to say. There are areas that need improvement. One of those areas, of course, the greenhouse. Now, I have brought down quite a few of our young tomato and chilli plants from home to go into the greenhouse, and they're sitting in there quite happily. And we're going to put those up into bigger and bigger pots, of course, as they grow. But at the moment, they are looking quite happy. I have had to put some tomato plants inside Grandad's greenhouse, the original greenhouse that I have here on the allotment. I have had to plant some tomato plants. That particular greenhouse is going to be dedicated to things like tomatoes, chilies and peppers this year. Tomatoes go in my large trays that I have at the bottom. These are large plastic containers in which I plant, or filled up with compost, and I'm going to plant tomatoes into there. I may also put some chilies and peppers, of course, as well. And the main advantage that I've done with these, instead of having a drainage hole on the bottom, it's about 2 centimetres up on the side so that it creates a bit of a well. A bit like my veggie pod that I have at home. The idea that these containers will need less watering because they've got a well at the bottom that will absorb liquid water up through the soil as the plants grow. That's the general idea. We could, of course, change that to auto pots in the future, but for now, we're sticking with this idea. The other greenhouse, which is going to be for cucumbers, I've got to spend a lot of time just getting in there and getting that ready. Still not glazed. But yeah, that is the allotment, which I've got to say has come together really, really well. I'm quite happy with how it is looking still. And most of all, we're starting to see plenty of growth. Now I'm going to go and visit Stephen's allotment. We visited Stephen's allotment in the past, but we haven't caught up with him for quite a while. It'd be nice to catch up and see how things are going. In the meantime, let's find out what's been going on in the Supporters Club this week. Well, I hope you are enjoying this podcast so far. If you are, then please do leave a rate and review on your podcast provider. It only takes you a few seconds, but it means the world to us, and it helps us get found by more people who might be interested in growing their own food. But not only that, if you are really enjoying this podcast, you want to help support the work that we do, then please consider becoming a member of our Supporters Club. For just £5 a month, you get access to extra behind-the-scenes podcasts that give you a bit of an idea of what's going on here at the Veg Grower Podcast HQ. But not only that, once a month, you also get a collection of seeds sent to your door as part of our seed club. And these seeds can be sown in that very month. Added to that, you also get a copy of our mini newspaper, which also gives you a few ideas of what you can be doing yourself throughout that month. And all that is just £5 a month, an absolute bargain if you ask me. Now, this week we've actually been sowing some turnips, a variety called Goldana, which should do pretty well. I'm quite excited to see how we get on with turnips. Not one of my favourites usually, but I'm excited to try these out. Now, if that sounds like something you are interested in signing up, then please head to the veggrowerpodcast.co.uk to find out more and sign up. Well, if you've listened to this podcast over the years, you know we like to visit other people's allotments. And one of the first allotments that we ever visited was Stephen's, and we haven't been here for a few years. But he's here today, back again. Hello.
Good to have you back. We've been saying we're going to do this for so long, so it's great actually having you here.
We were trying to work out when I last visited you. We keep in contact, and you're not actually all that far away from where I live. But COVID, I think we met up with each other just after COVID, but COVID has thrown quite a few social etiquette's gone out the window, shall we say.
That's it. We were sitting in my garden, separated by 2 or 3 metres, recording a podcast, I remember. And that's 5 years ago.
Yeah, it has been a while. But we're on your allotment today. And I always remember saying that I was always surprised just how small your allotment is. 4 metres by, we think about probably 10, maybe 15 metres long. But you've still got the same plot, you haven't expanded, but yet it seems bigger.
Maybe it feels bigger. I've been clearing a lot of the undergrowth away from a fence that sort of grows over and pinches all my space. Over the years I could tell, actually, you know what, looking at photos from years ago, my plot didn't have all this undergrowth. Now it does. So I've been spending a long time. There's about 4 metres of cleared fence, and that took me all day. There's an awful lot left to do.
So I should just explain, if you didn't hear the podcast we've done in the past, you are in Lancing near Worthing, which isn't that far from me. You're on a hill on the South Downs. Your allotment is at the very northern end, and it's literally up against a fence boundary with the South Downs National Park, just the other side of the fence. It's got trees and a lot of brambles that were coming over, and a lot of ingress from that side. And actually, the first thing I noticed is just clearing away that little bit has given you maybe only a foot, maybe 2 foot. It's made all the difference.
Not much, but suddenly that bit I'm looking at here cleared suddenly makes the whole area look different.
It really
and wider. A lot more space. I guess probably remember last time we probably tiptoed behind each other because the paths were so thin, whereas now we've got a bit more sense of space. If I can put the same effort in for the rest of the fence going down, then the whole plot will suddenly look a lot wider.
Yeah, I definitely agree. But there's also one other thing you've changed as well, I noticed, that I think has made this feel a bit bigger. You did have a fence around your plot.
Yeah. So inherited fence, just a wire fence, which when I first had the plot I used to religiously make sure the gate was closed, stop animals getting in and stuff. But over the years the fence has fallen down. I've realised fences don't really stop animals getting in. So I just made a conscious decision to, as it fell down, just to get rid of it completely, which is what I've done now. And now I've just got decking board along the edge just to make it easier to keep the weeds out. But you can just step in and out. So I'm growing right up to the perimeter of my plot now. There's no fence in the way. So that gives another impression of being a little bit more open, a lot more spacious, and you just pop in and out wherever you are.
It's definitely made a big difference, I feel. So here we are. It's the beginning of May, I think. No, it's the end of April. One of the things I've noticed is that your allotment, despite only being a few miles away from mine, it's actually further ahead. One thing that I've noted in particular, your potatoes.
Yeah, no, that surprises me because those were in maybe the first, second week of April. And I was surprised they popped up quite quickly, and I've banked them up and they've come back through again. The other rows which I planted a few weeks later, some of those are starting to show, but I'll probably bank those up within about a week. I'm quite happy with what I'm seeing on there after such a short amount of time. I don't know why.
I put mine in a couple of weeks before yours, and they're not, I mean, when I say they're further ahead, I'm talking twice as much growth on the foliage.
I can only think maybe it's the good weather we've had all throughout April. We've had little rain, a lot of warmth, and maybe that mixture has just got them going a lot quicker, whereas ones planted earlier, still going to grow in exactly the same way, but have had a bit of that March colder weather maybe.
Well, I also think it is down to the difference in soil. I'm on a very heavy clay soil. Clay soil takes a bit longer to warm up. Your soil here is looking quite sandy because you are top of the downs. This is a chalk hill which is very free draining, and I think that's had this knock-on effect that it's created a very sandy soil that just drains out a bit easier and warms up quicker.
It could well be. It certainly warms up because you've got the sun all day. It's on the side of a hill facing south, so it's going to be hit by sun. But you're absolutely right. It is sandy and chalky, so it doesn't keep the water well. But at the same time, it's not heavy clay, so it's not preventing anything from growing.
But one of the things that you were talking about before we started recording was getting horse manure and bringing up bags of compost because you are on a hill. And I remember this with my first allotment, which was also on a hill, carrying bags of compost and horse manure. It's not fun up a hill.
It's not fun. So I probably 5-6 years ago, because it's before COVID, I did go completely no dig and brought up tens and tens of bags of horse manure and put it on the top. And I did have good results from it, but the effort of doing that, almost killed me. Enough to think the next year I thought, life is too short to be doing that. So I sort of scaled back on that. So now this has had about maybe between 10 and 15 bags of rotted horse manure spread over the top and then hoed in. So it wasn't enough to cover everything to a thick, inches layer. But there was enough to sort of leave on top for a few months during the winter and then hoed it in before I wanted to use it. And I think it's made quite a nice, sort of soil now, really.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the soil and I can already see it looks so much better than how I remember it in the past. The soil just looks much healthier, much better for plants, much easier to control the weeds as well, I believe.
We're looking at it here today. I don't see many weeds, although as I keep looking, I can always see the extra one popping up as we talk. But yeah, my first job when I come up in the mornings each week is spend 5 minutes, go from end to end, digging out bindweed, and that's about the only weed I do get. But if I just keep on top of that each week, then I have no real problems, really.
I mean, one of the other things that you've said as well with getting compost here to go no dig, to prevent the weeds, look after your soil and everything like that, is you've been able to produce enough compost on your allotment to fulfil all your needs.
Between the bags of compost I bought in, from the local stables, I probably had enough compost, probably just to cover those potatoes. In fact, I will, instead of banking some of those up, I will cover them up with what I've got left of homemade compost. Also, the potato tubers themselves, I planted in homemade compost. So I dug a hole, filled it up, put the potato in and put the soil on top. So I'm quite pleased, and I don't think there's anything I've done. I think I've just been lucky this year, but I haven't made enough compost to do a whole plot. So I don't see how I could do that at all. But I've had enough to mean I don't have to keep going to the stables to dig compost out of a heap and bring it up the hill here. I have got the mixture of my homemade and the horse, and I think that's a good mix. And it also means I'm not spending my life climbing hills with big bags, which certainly takes the fun out of gardening. And if there's no real fun, then there's no point really doing it. So I'm happy to sort of found the mixture. The same with the no dig. I would be 100% no dig if I had the compost, but because I don't, I'm quite happy to hoe it in. I'm not digging,
Yeah.
but I'm not also no digging, but I'm sort of doing a mixture of the two there, which suits me and suits the soil.
It is definitely working. So if we walk down your allotments, you get your raspberries, which again, they're in flower as well, which is quite early.
Yeah, but they're a strange bunch of raspberries in that I don't know whether they're summer or autumn. I think they've been neglected over years by previous owners, if you like. So I think when that happens with raspberries, they turn a bit more hybrid, and so they're prickly, some of them are smooth. but they will give me raspberries in the summer, and they give me a few more, not as good, but they give me a few more in the autumn.
Yeah.
And then I don't cut them right down to the bottom like autumn raspberries, because they tend to take years to come back up again. I just cut them halfway down, and then we're in end of April, and as you say, I can see flowers will be there quite soon.
I've just noticed on that flower there's a ladybird as well, which I've seen quite a few ladybirds
Always a good sign.
when we're here today. Yeah, they are the allotment best friend. Now, moving on further down again, you mentioned your potatoes, and I'm quite jealous, I'll be honest with you. Your currants are even getting currants developing as well.
I'm amazed by that, because I swear 2 weeks ago there was hardly any leaves on these bushes, but now there's little tiny currants. So I've got to get these covered quite soon to stop the birds going on them. It's a good year.
I keep saying it's early, but it just feels like this year everything's came on really early, all of a sudden. And I certainly don't think I'm where I should be based on the conditions, but I'm still worried about that risk of frost.
Yeah, I think the same. I keep thinking I should have a lot more in now because of what the weather's like. But when I remind myself it's April.
Yeah.
But I think in Sussex, and you've probably seen the same down in Littlehampton, we've had maybe 2 or 3 years of very cold winters. But before then, we had a lot of years of very warm winters. And I used to overwinter a lot of plants, but I gave up doing that a couple of years ago when the frost just kept getting it. But I think this year has been another warm one. I should have overwintered and be gaining the advantage.
Yeah, you can never judge. I mean, this is why I try and overwinter everything that I can overwinter, but with the view that if it dies, I can always re-sow in the spring. So it's playing a bit of a game, but even though it's a beautiful sunny day, we've had a beautiful sunny week, it is still possible that we could just get a sudden drop in the weather and get some frost. We are getting to that point where it is safe, we're nearly there, but there's still a risk.
Yeah, I think end of April we should be pretty safe, but thinking back last weekend, it was raining and it was cold, it was like winter.
True, very true. Now, one of the things I can tell you've only recently sown is radishes, but your radishes or some of them, are certainly looking ready. And I'm sowing radishes pretty much every week at the moment, little and often. But you've done these for a reason here.
Yeah, these are more sacrificial, although they'll be eaten, but they're old seed, so I've sowed a lot. But what I've done is I've sown 2 rows of parsnips, which notoriously take ages to germinate, and their fail rate is pretty high. So I did buy new seed to do that this year. And I have had problems previous years where none of them have come up or they've all been eaten. I don't know whether you remember previous times I've started them off in toilet rolls because it's been such a poor germination. So knowing that I would sow them, I can't really remember, maybe February, March time.
Right.
To make sure I could remember what I'd actually done, I just put in some radish in little bits along each row, just as markers, so I could actually tell where those rows were. And so now we have radish, which some of them look ready to pick, and I can see quite a lot of parsnips which will need thinning quite soon.
Radish is going to be out there before those parsnips are fully coming up, but as a marker, the first thing you see is obviously the radish, and now you look further, you can see where the parsnips have started germinating. So they've definitely done that job and made it good use of the space as well. You're getting 2 crops from one.
It's good use of space because those radish will come out, and the parsnips have still got 6 months to go. It would have been forgotten way before I pull those up. Also, it's old seed I'm using, so I'm using up old seed. And it's just something I've always done. So back in the garden, we saw my row of carrots, which have yet to germinate. But again, they had radish markers.
Yeah.
So I have radish markers, but I also have radish to actually eat as well. These will be eaten,
Yeah.
but they're really grown just to remind me what is meant to be sort of coming up.
The story you told me earlier as well is that some of your excess vegetables you actually give away to some of the parents because you and your wife childmind.
That's exactly it, really. So we include that in the care we give for children, so they get involved with sowing and more with harvesting, which they're really keen on doing. But even that, we still have enough left over. So if the parents want tomatoes or rhubarb or cucumbers, if we have a glut of cucumbers, which we do some years, then we're able to give them to people who want them as well.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Now, finally, it looks like you've got some broad beans, which again, they're looking incredibly healthy and much further along than mine. Spring or autumn?
Spring.
Oh.
Normally I would do autumn, but having suffered from frost for the last couple of years, I thought this year I wasn't going to grow any because we've got a freezer full of broad beans. But actually, when the time came, I did plant some.
Couldn't resist.
Exactly. So again, I don't know whether we'll eat a lot of these or we will compost. Probably eat them because I really like broad beans, but I'm the only person in the family that does.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have a lot of broad beans. But again, it's fun of growing them, really, and giving them away, obviously.
Yeah.
Broad beans, do you see them in the supermarket that often at a reasonable price? I'm not too sure if you do, really. So yeah, people will be more than happy to take broad beans off of us if they like the taste and the feel of broad bean.
Supermarket broad beans just don't taste the same anyway.
No.
And then finally at the back, you've got your rhubarb, which exceptional growth on that. You've been making quite a few harvests already, I believe.
This is a battle about being able to pick it quick enough. And just, again, our freezer is full up with rhubarb. We've been eating rhubarb every week and we're giving it away every week, and yet it just comes back and it's massive.
So we say it's massive. I mean, as I said, it's the beginning of end of April. This rhubarb is probably 3 foot tall. There's 2 plants there, you say, and they take up probably 1 metre in length and 1 metre depth as well. So there's a lot of rhubarb there. A lot of rhubarb.
It's always done very well, and I do always cover it with a rotted horse manure during the winter, and that's all I do, really. Don't water it, don't do anything, it just grows. That will die back in the summer and it will come back in the autumn and give us a little second harvest, which is always good.
Wow, fantastic. Well, there we are. We have done a tour of your allotment with a few conversations along the way. There's still plenty of space for more stuff to go in. You got any big plans?
Yes, so we've got holes with homemade compost filled in where courgettes will go in, hopefully middle to end of next month in May. Right in front of us there'll be a bunch of sweet corn. Now, we grew sweet corn in the garden last year only because the seeds came from yourself with the seed club, and I've never grown sweet corn before, so I thought, well, again, let's give it a go. And they were amazing. They look great in the garden because they grew up really tall, made it look like a forest for little children as they walked along the path. And as a bonus, we had these huge corn on the cobs. It was fantastic. So this year I've grown a lot more. I'll do some in the garden and I'll do some up the plot up here. And we loved it last year. So that's what's going to be in this little clump on here.
Well, Stephen, thanks so much for joining us here. Of course, we will keep on track. Do you still have your blog running?
I certainly do. It's sunflower.mulville.co.uk. Also plot 110_Sussex on Instagram.
I will make sure I add all the links in the show notes. Right, with that, let's find out what Chef Scott has for us this week.
Chopping all the veggies, sizzle in the air. Chef Scott with the magic, smells are everywhere. Water starts to boil, onions hit the pan. Recipe of the week, let the feast begin. Cooking with Chef Scott, flavors come alive. Tune in every week for a tasty bite.
Hi, it's Scott here with this week's recipe. And after spending some long days at the allotment on the weekend, a little like Richard last week, I found myself a tad dehydrated. So, I decided to use the rhubarb I had picked to make a refreshing rhubarb and ginger cordial, and I thought I would share a recipe for it. So let's head to the kitchen and hear how it's made. As usual, you can find this recipe and others on the veggrowerpodcast.co.uk and on my Instagram page, Seed to Table, Plot 13. For this recipe, you will need 500 grams of rhubarb sliced into inch-thick pieces, 25 grams of fresh ginger sliced, 250 grams of caster sugar, 500 millilitres of water, the juice of 1 orange, and the juice of 1 lemon. Method: put all the ingredients together in a saucepan and bring to a boil. Then turn down to a gentle simmer and simmer for 15 minutes. Then allow to cool and then rest in the fridge overnight. Now pass through a fine sieve so you are just left with a liquid. You can discard the leftover fruit or use it in a crumble or as a compote to go with yoghurt. You can store the cordial in a sterilised bottle in the fridge for a good 7 weeks. And that's the recipe done, and that's it from me this week.
Well, there's been a lot to get through this week. Another delicious recipe there from Chef Scott. Once again, I've got to admit, rhubarb and ginger cordial sounds absolutely lovely. And we're having some really lovely weather at the moment. And this just brings me up to what's been going on here at the kitchen garden over this last week, because weather has been really, really lovely, but I'm still worried about that risk of frost. So I'm holding off from getting any plants outside completely just yet. That being said, I've moved my peach tree and my lemon tree out from the greenhouse on the hope that it's going to be okay. Got to keep a close eye on the weather and I will see what happens. Now, added to that, I had my birthday last week, and as a typical thing for gardeners, we get gardening presents. My brother-in-law gave me a couple of lovely fruit bushes. We've got a lovely big tree, only a young one at the moment, but we've potted that up into a bigger pot in order to keep it going. And he also gave me a red kiwi vine, which I'm really excited to see how it turns out. I absolutely love kiwis. I've never realised they did a red variety, and least of all that it was possible to grow here in the UK. So I'm really intrigued and excited to see how we get on with those. Now, talking of potting up, there's of course been a lot more potting on going on. As our plants get bigger and bigger, they need more and more space. The last thing we want for them to become is root bound inside the pot. So I'm trying to give them a bit more space and potting them up into bigger and bigger pots. This is obviously all my seedlings that we have in the various locations scattered right throughout my house, taking up lots and lots of space, and outside in the grow houses, greenhouses, etc. etc. Of course, my greenhouse, we've got the autopot system in there, and that is fully planted up. The chilies, the aubergines, the tomatoes are all in there, and they've all put on a considerable amount of growth in this last week. There's definitely been a sudden push for growth over this last week. What I'm really excited about is the aubergines, because I reckon they're putting on such good growth. There's a good strong chance we're actually going to be able to get aubergines this year from the plants in the greenhouse. Fingers crossed. I absolutely love the autopot system. If you haven't heard of it, we've done past podcasts on it. I'm going to have to go into it in a bit more detail once again, but I do have a discount code, AUTO10RVG, to use at the autopot website, if that is of any interest to you. Outside, I have said that I'm holding off from planting out any plants as much as I really want to, but I have been sowing seeds directly outside in the soil, just like I did down on the allotment. Now, a lot of these are roots, carrots, onions, which we've transplanted actually, spring onions, parsnips, radish, beetroot, spinach, all of which we've sown directly into some of my beds outside. peas and beans as well, also sown directly in beds outside. And we're also looking a bit more at doing some companion planting. So alongside the peas, I've also sown a row of parsley seeds and coriander seeds to try and see if they work together in the beds. Companion planting is something that I try and do quite a bit of, but I'm trying to move away. What I've done a lot in the past is monoculture, I guess you could say. I've always had beds for peas and beans, brassicas in another bed and so on. I'm trying to move away from that a little bit more. It's not easy because I like it when a crop comes out that I pot another plant in, and that's a lot of the reasons why I grow garlic in one bed, for example, because when the garlic comes out I can then plant something else in it. But I do like the idea of a bit more polyculture, a bit more mixed planting. But yeah, a lot of seed sowing directly in the soil. I think it's warm enough that we can get away from it with that now, and once they germinate I reckon the risk of frost will have passed. So that's what's been going on here at the kitchen garden. Let us know what you've been up to in your own allotment and your own garden. Now, if you want to get in touch, my email address is richard@veggrowerpodcast.co.uk. Of course, you can visit the website, theveggrowerpodcast.co.uk, leave a comment or leave a voicemail as well. You can also find me on social media. Please do reach out and contact us. If you head to the website at theveggrowerpodcast.co.uk, you can also support this podcast by becoming a supporting member or using any of our affiliate links or even our merchandise, caps and mugs that we do sell on the website as well. Now, one of the big things that you can also do, which costs you nothing, is leave us a review on your podcast provider. That only takes you a few seconds, but it really helps us get found by more people. And we have had a review come in this week from a Jeanette Larson. She says, "Hello, I found this podcast and I have been listening for hours while attending to my Norwegian garden. Thank you for the informative podcast. Love the tricks and tips for a lovely, productive garden. Here we are a month behind you, so handy for us to be prepared for what's to do coming up. And thank you, and once again, enjoy the special little moments outside." Thank you so much for reaching out. Absolutely love to hear from you more in Norway. And I agree, it is all about those little moments that we have in the garden. Right, well, that brings us up to the end of this week's podcast. We will be back again next time, so until then, please take care.